Section 2.3 is simplifying variable expressions. Learning target is I can simplify variable expressions. The parts of an expression added together are called terms. So, 2 plus x plus 3y. 2 is a term, x is a term, 3y is a term. The number part of a term with a variable is called the coefficient. So here, my 3 is my coefficient. 1 is what goes in front of my variable if there isn't a number, and my 1 is a coefficient. A term that has a number but no variable is called a constant term. 2, for example, is a constant because it doesn't change. It is constantly 2. If I tell you we have 2 something, you know what that means. And terms that have identical variable parts are called like terms. So if I had a plus 2x here, my 2x and my x would be like terms because they would have the exact same variable part here. They'd both have x's. So for example 1, we're going to identify the terms, like terms, coefficients, and constant terms of the expression. So terms are the individual pieces that are added together. So I have a y, I have an 8, I'm going to take the sign with the number, so a negative 5y, and a negative 3. And that works because remember when we have subtraction, we change it to adding the opposite, so it becomes a negative 5y. We change subtraction to adding the opposite, and it becomes a negative 3. So we can always just take that sign with our number. Our like terms are the ones that have the same variable parts. So here I have a y and a y. So y and negative 5y. I also have like terms with my 8 and my negative 3 because they have the same variable in that there isn't one. So those are like terms because they have the exact same variable in that there isn't a variable at all. My coefficients are the numbers in front of my variables. So again, remember if there's not a number in front, it's a 1. That is a coefficient. On my negative 5, y, my negative 5 is my coefficient. It's the number in front of my variable. It's the number of times, the number that's times our variable. In my constant terms are the ones without a variable. It is constantly 8, it never changes, and it's constantly negative 3, it never changes. So those are my terms, 4 of them, like terms, 2 sets, coefficients are just the numbers in front of my variables, so they go with this set, and my constants, which go there. We can use the distributive property to rewrite an expression such as 7x plus 4x as a single term. So it's kind of like using the distributive property backwards. I can take my x that's common, and I undo the multiplication. I take that out. So it's like I loop it back out of both pieces. What I have left then is just my coefficients, 7 plus 4. 7 plus 4 is 11. And usually we write our coefficient first, so it would be 11x. The like terms 7x and 4x have been combined, and the expressions 4x plus 7x have been simplified. A variable expression is simplified if it has no grouping symbols and all like terms are combined. So in example 2 here, if we look, I'm going to look for sets of like terms. I have an n here and an n here. So those two terms are like terms. If I look, my negative 7 doesn't have any variables, and neither does my 9. So those are also like terms. Again, when I combine like terms, I keep my variable, and I perform the operations on my coefficients. Remember, if there's not a number in front of a variable, it's a 1. So right now I take 4 minus 1, and I get 3 with my n. And I take negative 7 plus 9, and I get 2. Here we're going to identify the terms, like terms, coefficient, and constant terms. And then we're going to simplify the expression. So, first thing I'm going to do is figure out my terms. My terms are the things that are being added together. So I have a 3x, and I have a 2, and I have a 5x. Then I'm going to figure out my like terms. I have an x in both of these, so 3x and 5x are my like terms. My coefficients are any of the numbers in front of my variables. So I have a variable here with my x. The 3 then is a coefficient. A variable here with my x. That 5 is a coefficient. So 3 and 5 are my coefficients. And constants are any terms that don't have a variable. All I have here is a 2. Now it wants me to simplify the expression. In order to simplify it, I combine any of my like terms, and I do that by keeping my variable the way that it is. It's just an x, and I add my coefficients. So I get 8x, and then I still have a 2 left that didn't have any like terms. So 8x plus 2. In number 2, we're going to do the same. I'm going to list out all my terms. Remember, all my terms are my individual pieces that are being added together. So I have a negative 7b, I have a 3, I have a b, and I have a negative 10. My like terms are any of those terms that have the exact same variable. So my b's are like terms. And then I have 3 and negative 10. Those are also like terms because they have the same variable in that they don't have any at all. My coefficients are the number parts in front of my variables. So negative 7, and if there's not a number in front, it's a 1. My constants are any terms that don't have variables. So here it's 3 and negative 10. Now my simplified form, I'm going to combine all my like terms and then make sure every term is accounted for. So I have b's. So I keep my b, and I perform the operations on my coefficients. Negative 7 plus 1 gives me negative 6. My constants, I don't have any variables, so I don't have to write anything down there. And I take 3 plus negative 10, and I get negative 7. Double check to make sure everything's been used. I used my negative 7b and my b, my 3, and my negative 10. So we are good here. Now for 3, first thing I'm going to do is find my terms. They're the things that are added together. 5 is 1, 8w is 1, negative 6 is 1, and negative w is 1. Remember, we take our signs with our numbers. My like terms are the ones that have the exact same variable. So my w's go together, and then my constants go together, because they don't have any variables. Coefficients are just the numbers in front of my variables. Here's an 8. Here is a negative 1. My constant terms are any terms that don't have a variable. Here I have a 5 and a negative 6. Now in order to simplify it, I combine all my like terms and make sure nothing is left. So I have a w term and a w term. Keep the w and perform the operations on my coefficients. So 8 minus 1 gives me 7. Then I look at my next set of like terms. I'm going to add these up. 5 plus negative 6 gives me negative 1. Every term was used. So we are good here and simplified. A quick way to combine like terms is to add their coefficients mentally. So in example 3 here, we're going to simplify the expression with parentheses. Before we can simplify an expression, we have to get rid of our grouping symbols. So I'm going to take my 2 that's being multiplied times this into both pieces. So I take 2 times x, since I started off with multiplication, and then I take 2 times, again I'm going to take that sign with that number and get negative 4 here. which gives me 2x minus 8. Now, the rest of my problem here hasn't changed, so I'm going to bring that down. Now I'm going to look. Do I have any like terms? Well, here I have an x, and here I have an x. And my -8 and my 7 are both constants, so they're like terms as well. I keep my x, and I go ahead and do the operations with my coefficients. 2 plus 9 gives me 11. And I combine my constants as well. -8 plus 7 is -1. And that is as simple as I can go. I'm going to do the same thing in B here. I'm going to distribute. Because I'm multiplying a number times that parentheses, I'm going to take that number and multiply it through. So I'm going to take the sign with the number. Don't forget to take the negative with that 8. So it's going to go inside to both pieces. I have a -8 times, okay, and I have a -8 times the 2. When I simplify here, I get -8k minus 16. And I didn't change this 3k at all, so I'm going to bring that down. Now I'm going to check for any like terms. Here's a k, here's a k, so I can go ahead and combine those. I keep the k, and I perform the operations on my coefficients. So I take 3 minus 8, and I get -5k. I did not change this minus 16, so that just comes right down. And I get -5k minus 16. Same idea here. I have parentheses, I want to get rid of them, and I get rid of them by distributing. So remember, if there's not a number with our sign there, it's a -1. So it's a -1 that I take into both pieces here. I take a -1 times my 4a, and I take a -1 times my -3. So I bring down what's inside my parentheses without changing it. Again, we take the sign with the number. So -1 times 4a is -4a. -1 times -3 is +3. And I did not change this 4a, so I'm going to bring that right down. Now, as far as like terms go, I have an a here and an a here. I keep the a, and now I can do the operations on my coefficients. 4 minus 4 gives me 0a. I did not change that +3, so I'm going to bring it down. We know that 0 times anything is just 0. So 0 plus 3 gives me just 3. Feel free to pause here and give this a try. First thing I want to do is try and get rid of my parentheses. So I'm going to take my 4 that's outside and distribute it in as multiplication. Since I started multiplying, I'm going to keep multiplying. I take it times the x, and I take it times the 1. And that's going to give me 4x plus 4, since this is positive. Now I didn't change my plus 2x or my plus 5, so those come right down. Now I'm going to look to see if I have any like terms. Well, here I have x's, so those I can put together. And these have no variables, so I can put those together as well. I'm going to keep my variables and perform the operations on my coefficients. 4 plus 2 gives me 6. I can do the same thing with my constants. 4 plus 5 gives me 9. And I get 6x plus 9. On 5 here, I'm going to start off by distributing to get rid of my parentheses. I take the -3 times the 6 and the -3 times the -y. I started as multiplication. I keep multiplication, and I take the sign with my number there. I simplify. -18 plus -3 times a -1 gives me a positive 3y. I did not change that 10y. I look for like terms, my y's here. I keep my y, do the operations on my coefficients, and get 13. And then I did not change this -18. There was nothing to combine it with, so I leave it as just 13y minus 18. I'm going to stop here, and I'll finish in another video.